Let's start with the big question. When a new tool arrives, who is actually steering education? The market? So, General, I'll start with you. West Point has a 200-year mandate to produce leaders of character. You also helped modernize the soldier-scholar curriculum. In an era where artificial intelligence and autonomous systems are evolving in months and not decades, how do you ensure the Academy sets the direction for how technology is used in leadership rather than just reacting to the tools the tech market is trying to hand you?
Well, thank you for the question, and thank you for hosting me and allowing me to be here. I said a bit earlier that I came from New York, where it hasn't been above freezing for about a month, so getting invited to the World Government Summit in Dubai that's a good catch for February for me. So it's a great question. As you pointed out, the history of West Point is really an intersection between the timeless aspects of what we expect from our officers, but also the timely aspects. And so West Point, which came into creation as the military academy on March 16th, 1802, under the President Thomas Jefferson, really came with a mandate to do both. We need to create timeless officers, and those things are never going to change, those intangibles, character, leadership, values, but there's a timely component also, and that's really about making sure that the officers have the intellectual ability to navigate the complexities and the uncertainties and the ambiguities of the modern or future environment. And so we do that by doing two things. One is we provide an intellectual foundation to our graduates through a broad liberal arts education, really focused on creating an intellectual foundation so that they have that ability to navigate through that uncertainty. But the part you really want to hear about is the part about creating lifelong learners and fostering creativity and innovation and entrepreneurial spirit. And that really comes through addressing cadets through modern disciplines. And so technology is a really, really big part of what we're doing with the cadets. And when you asked about what's driving this, I will tell you that, in my opinion, the entire higher education model is being upended by technology. It's no longer about the receiving of knowledge, it's now about the application of knowledge, and that application of knowledge is really through experiential or projects-based learning. And so we combine that timeless component of a cadet's education through that intellectual foundation with this approach towards experiential learning that comes through the use of technology. And when you put those two together, you have officers or cadets or students that have the timeless characteristics you want, but also the timely ability to address the challenges of the future.
But worst case scenario, what would happen for an academy like yours if technology led it and not the other way around, and it wasn't education leading?
Yeah, I think that would be actually a bit dangerous. There's such a human component to leading. And so a student or a cadet needs to be able to still understand how to have the human element in how they approach problem solving or leading or building teams, but they need to be able to leverage technology so that they really can compete. The key is, the balance is to make sure that when a student puts these two together, that their critical thinking skills aren't atrophying, but they learn how to use the technology to advantage. And those two are very difficult. Creating that balance where you don't over-rely on the technology or you ignore the technology, that's a difficulty.
Because we've also seen a lot of people being very, let's say they don't want to go into technology, they're afraid of it. But at the same time, as you said, it's very important to balance between both, so you're not left behind, but at the same time, it doesn't control you.
Yeah, technology never loses, in my opinion. There's been many efforts throughout history to try to ban a particular type of technology. There's been international prohibitions on airplanes and balloons and submarines, and those things always fail. There's a famous story of Pope Urban II. He realized that crossbows were really effective at piercing armor, and this was upsetting the social order. And so he said, hey, anyone who uses a crossbow, you're gonna be excommunicated. So what did everybody do? Ooh, we better go get a bunch of crossbows. Like, technology always finds its way into modern society, and so we need to teach young people and all of us how to use technology in a way that's responsible, ethical, but also makes sense.
Dr. Chris, ASU is known for being innovative, very innovative. So when you innovate, what usually comes first? A human learning, or it's an issue you're trying to solve, then you use technology, or does the technology come first and then you're trying to adapt to that technology?
Thank you for the question. I want to say, I want to thank the members of the World Government Summit for putting me next to two people that I've never met, but I feel like they're my brothers from another mother. I'm an Air Force Academy graduate, and we've been doing work with the United States Army at ASU, building lifelong learners. And I'm just back from India when I was with some of the IITs, Gandha, Nagar, and some other places. So what a wonderful opportunity. So thank you for that. So we're going to start with the human part at ASU. And it's going to be grounded simply in our charter, which means we're going to judge ourselves by whom we include in their outcomes, and as opposed to whom we exclude. So by definition, our North Star for the last 23 years or so always starts with that. It doesn't matter if it's online learning, doesn't matter if it's AI or what have you, we always start with that paradigm, with that charter in mind. But then we quickly say, technology can help us enhance our charter, the first part of our charter, very much so, right? Mm-hmm. So if you think you're going to be an inclusive institution, so to put it in context, we have about 200,000 students, 100,000 online or 110,000 or so online, and 90,000 on ground on our campuses around the world. We have 500,000 people that are upskilling and reskilling. We have 42,000 K-12 students, some of them working with the digital school here, by the way. We have 42,000 K-12 students online and operate about 12 charter schools with 3,500 students. But so in order to ensure they're going to get the outcomes they need and the lives they want to lead and become the lifelong learners that Scott referred to, we need to leverage technology and jump into that 100% off the bat. And we've been able to do that with some of our AI initiatives, working with some of the mega scalers out there to be able to enhance our ability to touch learners along the way.
But what's one condition that would make you slow down or say no when it comes to a new technology tool? Is there something that scares you?
Well, I'm kind of like Scott on this one. Technology always wins. You're right, but you have to wrap around that a framework, an ethical framework. With us in a university, it starts with our faculty, and our provost has done a fine job with the faculty. We have about 6,000 faculty, and we have thousands of them that have been trained on the ethics of technology. We have a whole playbook, a whole handbook. We even design our technology in such a way where the AI checks on the AI. So there are certain deeply human things that we will not going to see control to. Putting a military hat back on, I've been following this for a while. There are some decisions in combat that soldiers, sailors, airmen need to make, and that's see that the technology. There's some decisions in the classroom that are deeply human that we're never going to give up and just see that the technology. But by the same token, we need to keep up with the technology and know that it enhances and increases our ability to achieve our mission and our charter.
Madhav, so I want to ask you, in reality, who do you think is shaping education? Is it the technology or the students and the educators?
I think basically it's a combination of all. I mean, obviously, when you look at academia, it becomes extremely foundational, but that foundational structure is super important. Mm-hmm. At the same time, you can't neglect the realities of the market. The market is moving at a terrific pace. The dynamics of the market is changing. Today, if you look at having come from the corporate world into the academic world, we always talk about product life cycles, which once upon a time used to be 3 years, came down to 18 months, has come down to 6 months, and we fear that it could be changing every quarter. And that's the pace at which technology in the market, where the consumption is happening, is changing. So there's a necessity from the academic perspective to keep pace with it, because we generate talent at the end of the day, and that talent needs to be relevant to the marketplace. So there is definitely a pressure that is coming onto the academic system in terms of managing the appropriate curriculum, being a little bit more flexible, giving the choices to the students to make. Foundational sciences are important, but at the same time, realities of the market is something that you need to be absolutely cognizant of, and fine-tune what you deliver in terms of education is appropriate to what the market needs, so that we are able to produce that continuous pipeline of talent that the market will require, the industry will require. So it is a combination. It's very difficult to say which one comes first, is the chicken or the egg, but you need to be cognizant of what's happening in the marketplace.
So you all agree that technology can pull education in very powerful ways. But now we're going to be discussing what education should not give up under any circumstance. So General, I want to start with you. So you lead the academic board of an institution that has produced world leaders, from Dwight Eisenhower to Buzz Aldrin, and CEOs of global major corporations. As technology becomes more and more powerful, what is one human capability you believe every degree graduate must still develop under any circumstance?
I think that again, to the intangibles, that character matters, that you need to instill in anybody at any time certain values. For West Point, those values are duty, honor, country, but there's underlying those, there's other foundational principles that I think are universal, and these would be something that we oftentimes talk about in the U.S. Army, but loyalty and duty, respect.
So they're still the same, more or less.
They're very much, you're right, and that doesn't change. You always need to have leaders of character, regardless of the situation or the circumstances, and I think that's something that should never change and can never change.
Hey, Scott, you almost need them more when the technology gives more power to the individual, right?
I agree with that. I think that I think that's a great point, that you need to be more proactive in your leadership and your reliance on your values as technology starts to have a bigger place in society.
And don't you think as well, like technology, how it's going fast quickly, is giving people more time to focus on themselves? So instead of a task taking 10 hours a day, it now takes 1 hour, and then you can focus on things that are more humane, more of self-development, more on the aspects you just discussed?
I absolutely think that's the case. For me, that tends to be, I scroll through my phone 9 hours out of the 10 that have been given back to me. No, I'm just kidding. I think you're right. I think that the technology can create such efficiencies that if used correctly, it's really exciting, because what it does is that through those efficiencies, you can start to regain time. And in that time, you can do certain things. And some of those things that you can do is actually regain some of the things that have been lost due to bureaucracy or limitations placed on not having that technology available. For example, you might be able to go and engage with someone you're leading or working with at a personal level, because you do have actually a little bit more time to do that. So I think there's some great advantages to the efficiencies gained by technology.
To add to that point, I think if you combine technology with human capability, augment it, that is supremely critical. And that comes in terms of moral and contextual judgment. That's very critical, because people spoke about ethics in environments of constraint, limited resources. I come from the global south, computing priorities, real human consequences. I think that is super critical. Graduates must learn to decide responsibly under ambiguity. I think that's very, very important. No algorithm can substitute for ethical reasoning. I think that's very, very important to know, grounded in a live reality, especially in societies where education and various decisions affect millions. So that's very, very important. I think augmenting technology with that human capability, reasoning, is very critical.
Dr. Chris, so I once saw something on Instagram that says, I want artificial intelligence to do my laundry while I do art, and not the other way around. Don't you think what's happening now is the opposite? Where does it fall when it comes to innovation?
Well, it can kind of go anywhere, right? Let's take a step back in terms of how AI has just sort of changed the game versus other technologies, right? And it'll speak to your question. So the Gutenberg press was amazing. It gave people an opportunity to read in a way and get access to books in a way they'd never had before. You know, in the old Oxford tradition, you'd go to a classroom, a lecture hall, and they would speak to you in Latin, and you would write in Latin what was going on, and then slowly but surely it would trickle down. All the technology up to this point, including computational capacity, computers, they would hit big entities like the government first, or big business first, like the smaller computer. AI has hit everybody at the same time. So on your phone, the same time you're looking at AI, the IIT leadership are looking at AI, DARPA is looking at AI, Stanford, ASU looking at AI. So in terms of the artist or the laundry, it's up to you. And that's what's most compelling, is that you can make the decision, which means that the ethical grounding and the character rooting that we have, whether it be in uniform or be a scientist or an educator, is so much more important, because it's all happening all at once.
So, General, I want to ask you, what's one policy that governments should and must answer to when it comes to will technology lead education or follow it?
So I don't know if it's so much you can distill it into a policy, but it's really critical that the critical thinking skills that have underlied the creation of this amazing technology don't atrophy, and there becomes an over-reliance on technology. And sometimes I think that perhaps it's okay for us to have young people, for example, to remove all digital devices, or to have some space where, I oftentimes be like, hey, feel free to read a book, right? I mean,
We saw some countries doing that, like banning social media for kids
and,
under
and-
16.
And I'm not
Australia.
saying ban it or don't ban it, but I do think trying to ensure there's a balance, and so that the a lot of times if you become over reliant on the technology, how do we know if it's accurate or it's hallucinating or not? I mean, you have to have the ability to do that, and I sometimes think those that are digital natives, unlike myself, maybe over rely on the technology for their answers or how they think the world is working, versus being able to, with a healthy dose of cynicism, look at it and say, actually, you know what, this is about an 80% solution, but it's not exactly right.
I used to use a lot of M dashes before ChatGPT, and now I can't use it
That's
anymore
right.
because people are going to think I'm using ChatGPT. Dr. Chris, the same question to you. What's one policy governments should implement?
Well, I think that you alluded to it a second ago, is that it can be age appropriate, right? I mean, I love our compatriot from Jamaica who talked about getting technology to rural areas and in the developing South and getting it to rural areas. But you might not have to give every 10-year-old access to Netflix 24/7, right? So I think that government and whether it be as in, I won't say extreme, but as involved as it is, say, in Australia, where they made a very, very big cut on when it comes to social media. But I do think that governments, companies, parents, families can modulate the use of technology and make it age appropriate, because there are certain things you might miss. They're coming up if they get too much technology at one time, and there's some things they probably just don't need to be exposed to so early.
Madhav, same question.
Okay, so I think I'll give it from a global south lens perspective. I think fundamentally there should be institutional trust backed, right, by autonomy. Very, very critical from an education perspective. So governments must trust mission-led institutions, like, for example, IIT Madras, allow them to experiment, allow them to fail, allow them to then lead. I think that's very critical, but hold them accountable, because the outcomes can be public outcomes. So you have to hold them accountable, but give them that autonomy and trust them. I think that's very important. And don't be very procedural on compliance and all of that. I mean, as long as the public outcomes are desirable and they deliver what is expected of, I think allow the institutions to give them that autonomy to be able to do this, right? And we obviously, from our perspective, we realized very soon that we can't copy-paste models from across the globe. We need to be cognizant, once again, I repeat, of what is relevant to our markets and our needs. And there, the point made by Chris about India, for example, and many of the growth economies in that region, is everything that we do has to be inclusive, because there is a need.
General, Madhav, Dr. Chris, thank you so much for this insightful panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.